Welcome to a very special episode of the Film Board, movie conversation podcast about the latest releases that you've seen and want to talk about. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Justin Jaeger, and we've been talking about the latest work of Aaron Sorkin and wondering just a little bit why it seems to be that we're the only ones loving the work of the writer-director in his efforts to catalog a very special week in being the Ricardos.
Why is this coming out now?
Lucille Ball's a threat to the American way of life?
Does the FBI have any case against Lucy?
I need you to help me save my marriage.
How many times I gotta explain where I was and what I was doing?
You gotta explain.
You being funny right now?
I'm Lucille Ball. When I'm being funny, you'll know it.
This is getting out of hand.
Madness.
Have you been cheating on me?
The story's made up.
If they boo me,
If they boo you, we're done.
JJ,
Hi.
why are we on an island?
Are we
Does it
really
feel
though?
that way?
I think
I don't know
think
if
we're on
we
a
are.
Discord island because we've
Do you
seen
think?
there's some nominations coming out for this thing.
God, but are they bitter nominations? Are they
Explain that.
spiteful
Why would you say bitter?
nominations? I don't know. I think you might be right. I think you
Okay.
might be right that we are a part of there's a part of our community that doesn't love this movie as much
Right.
as I walked away loving this movie, and I was really surprised. The thing that I have heard more often from more than one person is that I'm not really interested in a Lucille Ball movie. But is this a Lucille Ball movie?
Well, that's the beauty of Sorkin here, right? I mean, Lucille Ball is the vehicle, and I guess there's other Lucy biopics out there that maybe you want to avoid, but if you like Sorkin and I'm going to contend as we talk about this that this is one of the best. I had to go through all of the movies again to see where it stacked up for me, and this is like my second favorite Sorkin of all time, and fights for Moneyball at the top because it is not only all the things that you might love about Aaron Sorkin, but there's so much more to this. There are layers. There is so much more than the Lucille Ball story here. It's a really, really solid film.
The story covers a week in the world of Lucy and Desi, leading to a live taping of I Love Lucy in 1953. Along the way, the film covers their rocky relationship as a husband and wife. First, the accusation of Ball's participation in the Communist Party and calls to testify before McCarthy. And it's all wrapped up in a bow that leads to a commitment to have a baby on network television, all in a week's work, right? That's a lot. That's a lot. Now, it also, I think, just going through that brief summary of the three, I think, major beats in the movie, it does well to diminish so much other stuff that goes on in this film.
Oh, there's so much. Yeah. There's so many dynamics and things about workplace dynamics and fame and and gender roles. I mean, it's so great. There's so much to talk about.
Before we dig into the details, just a few quick notes. Make sure you join our online community and fellow movie lovers, and you can join in the Being the Ricardos love or bash, whatever you'd like to do over on the True Story FM Discord server. You can join at thenextreel.com/Discord. And if you like what we're doing here, why not become a supporting member? Visit thenextreel.com/membership. Learn more about benefits, the members-only super secret Discord channels, show live streams, merch, and so much more. Again, at thenextreel.com.
Woohoo!
This is, to me, ends up being very quickly a cultural essay that happens to revolve around Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Now, when you say cultural, it makes me think of the time. Do you mean it that way, or do you mean culture?
I do.
Generally. Okay.
I do, but I also think that it is culture more writ large, specifically when we're talking about relationships in the workplace, relationships and crashing headlong into profession. So the interpersonal and personal dynamics that are going on between Lucy and Desi, but not only that, gender roles, gender responsibilities in the workplace too, and how the film sometimes heavily leans on the perspectives of, representation in the workplace, ageism in the workplace, those sorts of things. How heavy-handed did you feel like that hit you? Just right? A little too much?
Well, see, so the way that I viewed it, and I think we want to talk about the structure a little bit when we get into it, but the way that I viewed it was that this moment in time, whether it's fully actual, historical, or fictionalized for the purpose of telling the story, which I think that's what I want to talk about a little bit. The moment in time that this film represents is this sort of progressive cusp where we can talk about all of those things, and we can talk about how it is heavy-handed in the way it's delivered, but it's meant to be so that we will consider the ramifications of what they're talking about in the gender roles in places of sitcoms and the birth of new ideas and bringing new ideas to the small screen. This kind of thing, it is heavy-handed, talking about pregnancy, talking about the relationships of old doddering men with young attractive women on TV and these kind of things, but it's there for a point. So it doesn't bother me that it's heavy-handed, because it's just one of the myriad of different issues that they're addressing in this entirely dramatic period of time, again, whether it's historical or not, for what was happening with this show.
You know what I think is so interesting about that? And I have to take a step back to something like The Social Network, which, when I first saw it, I've always enjoyed the movie, but I didn't fall in love with the movie until later. Okay. And part of it was because when I saw it, I was so deeply embroiled in social media and the business of social media and the business of these burgeoning network companies. Yeah. And I found myself just sort of offended by how fictionalization was layered on top of, the story for dramatic purposes. And this is one of those things I think Michael Crichton would call the wet streets cause rain syndrome, right? It's that whole idea that you're reading the newspaper and you're reading about something that you really know well, and you are able to critique the newspaper's impression of it, and you can say, "Oh, that's wrong. That's that's bogus. That's not how it works." And then you turn the page and you read about something that's outside of your expertise, and you suddenly, because it's in the newspaper, you think, "Oh my God, that must be really true." It's
a hardened truth. Yes, exactly.
Right. And so that is exactly what I was falling prey to. But what I didn't realize, and where I think some of the art and craft of Sorkin comes in first as a writer, is that I think he makes smart choices about the things that he chooses to dramatize and the things that he chooses not to, and to take straight up. And I think that causes a movie like The Social Network to age better. Because of the way those signals are amplified over time, distanced from, the specifics, right? And it becomes a dramatic piece that speaks to the emotional resonance and feels, therefore, more important to me.
Right. It's an artistic commentary rather than the idea of it being a news story. And that's something that Sorkin does in a way with his dramatic history better than most, right? I mean, if you look at all of the films in his repertoire, there's so many examples of this thing where it doesn't have to be exact, because what he does to it makes it a better story. And through The Social Network's a great example. And I think through this film too, as we talk about it more, we end up with a wonderful artistic commentary on so many of those issues that we may not be able to recognize in the moment. When you talked about being sort of embroiled in social media. We can't recognize those issues in the moment when we're participating. But when we take a step back and we look at it through the audience's eyes or through Sorkin's eyes, we can see a much deeper message that he's putting through in a very artistic way.
Yeah. And I think for me, you look at the stories that I like the most of his. Moneyball, I never needed distance because I don't live in the world of baseball, building teams and that. Yeah. I just believed it from day one, and it became my favorite of his films.
It's my top one too, so I'm right there with you.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Malice, I don't spend a lot of time in the OR, but my goodness, I did enjoy my experience with that film. A Few Good Men, same thing. So I think from his scripts, I feel like, he's settled science. The guy, for me, is a damn good storyteller. Yep. And where I think we have had we've been able to witness a sort of learning curve is in him as a writer-director, right? When he's working on from Molly's Game, Trial of the Chicago 7 to being the Ricardos. Yep. You, I think, are super bullish on Molly's Game, right?
Not as much as this,
No?
to be honest. And that's
Really?
the thing. I liked Molly's Game, but it wasn't, it was kind of middle of the road for me. Whereas this, I need to confess something in that when I went to watch this movie, I didn't know it was a Sorkin film. And I've watched it twice now. I went back to watch it again to go for this. And, when they pop up that final card in there and say written and directed by Sorkin, I'm like, oh, yes. It was just, I was so excited because I just thought there was all this witty banter and wonderful stuff through it. And then I was like, of course. It was like a great reveal for me at the end of the film.
Yeah, somebody's doing a great Sorkin.
Right. I didn't even think that because, and we're going to get to the acting performances later, but I didn't even get to that because I was so entranced by what was happening, both from the story and from the dialogue, which is, is something that we should celebrate in Sorkin.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. When the dialogue can sort of take on a life of its own. So that's great.
For me, I look at these at the first two. In Molly's Game, I was a 4-star in Molly's Game, and the same on Trial of Chicago 7. And I think I think Chicago 7 suffers probably the most of the three in terms of telling true stories,
right.
Just because it's so mired in cultural history and politics, and we just know a lot about those people.
And the fictionalizations there. You want to talk about heavily-handed? I mean, they're done on purpose. I mean, maybe they all are done on purpose, but it's so directed at manipulation in Chicago 7 that I didn't feel that way about this film at all.
Right. And that's a funny thing. When I look at this, at Chicago 7, which is, I think, a whip-smart script with a Class A cast. I mean, an unreal cast. Mm-hmm. And yet it's still not quite living up to the sum of its parts. Chicago 7, right? I still walk away with a sense of that kind of emptiness that we're talking about here. To me, being the Ricardos is so far peak Sorkin as writer-director. I feel like this is an example of a guy who has learned a lot of lessons, and he has been able to apply them judiciously behind the camera, just as he has the pen. And that's, I think, a real reason to celebrate.
Well, that, and I mean, in watching it the second time and then knowing the things that I didn't know the first time, which there's more than just the Sorkin reveal for me, which we'll get into as well. But being able to kind of step back and watch what the camera's doing from a storytelling perspective, to watch the interpretive things that they do to integrate flashback with the story, to sort of take liberties with the way that the reality is experienced. These are all very creative film ideas that you wouldn't see, I think, in those earlier Sorkin pieces. And this is something that I think is really a great way to watch this movie, to get beyond that first complaint that you heard, like, I don't want to watch a movie about Lucille Ball. Well, this is a strong film regardless of the subject matter. And I think it's worth it to watch, even if you have a negative opinion about I Love Lucy.
Do you have an opinion of I Love Lucy?
Absolutely
personally?
Not. That's the weird thing. Like, I think I have a general respect for the show and what it meant to America. And I think they do a lot of time setting up the flashbacks to sort of build that with people who don't, right? In talking about the viewership and all these different aspects of the show that made it such a cultural sort of touchstone when it existed. I never felt that way. I recognize the sort of the genius of physical comedy that Lucille Ball was, but it never really got me. I think of her more as sort of a symbol of that time rather than something that connects with me artistically. But watching this and seeing the sort of Sorkin's interpretation of the discrepancy between the character and the person, I think was wonderful and gave me so much more depth of respect for the show and for the creative process that went into it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I did not, I'm with you. I did not have a strong opinion of I Love Lucy. I've seen a couple of episodes, but what is interesting about this experience is that my time with Nicole Kidman's version of Lucille Ball, and in particular, Javier Bardem's, time as Desi Arnaz.
Yeah.
This is another thing where I'm at risk of recanonizing in my head who these people were. I mean, I felt so strongly about those performances.
So I agree with Nicole Kidman for sure. And but with
Bardem. That's fascinating.
Well, because he's such and this is weird, but this is like a casting thing. Like he's such a physically different man to me than Desi Arnaz. And I think that was something that stuck with me throughout this film. They are but he's perfect. I mean, he's a perfect cast for this. I don't discount the cast, and I think he did a wonderful job in delivering the character. It's just, I always thought it was Javier Bardem playing that character, whereas I got a little bit lost in Nicole Kidman and really sort of picturing the actual Lucille Ball delivering what she was delivering to us, especially when she was acting as Lucille Ball, acting as Lucy Ricardo.
Yeah.
Right?
Takes your breath away.
When she would get in the studio and she's doing the character, it is just so great. I mean, it is so, it's a carbon copy. It's wonderful. It's so exciting to see that transformation there.
You know, it's interesting you say it that way, because I agree with you about Lucille Ball. It is a carbon copy, and I don't know that that is a universal good. For me, she is so Lucille, and I think what Nicole Kidman is able to do there is that when when you see her on screen, it is the carbon copy. We need that. And when you see her off screen, it is a representation of what a professional and famous woman is fighting for and against in the business. And that dichotomy, that duality is important to us. I think Bardem, for me, is I think he's the Desi I need to counter that pairing of those two Lucys. And I don't think somebody, because Desi, the Desi we know on the show, we know wasn't the same kind of Desi. And I haven't seen a lot of, behind the scenes footage of Desi Arnaz. I don't know who Desi Arnaz was as a guy. The only Desi I know was, I guess, a slightly, his voice was slightly higher than the Desi we got from Bardem. He was wound a little bit tighter. He was like a tight spring, and Bardem is like a blunt instrument. You know what I mean? Like he's such a giant personality, but I needed that level of Desi to counter the size of Lucille Ball's character that Nicole brought to the.
I 100% agree with that, and it works. It works on screen. Yeah. I don't think anyone else. Well, I mean, I'm stuck in the mode of what I just saw, but I can't imagine anyone else playing that role. I think that their performances are what it immediately stand. I mean, what I know they're nominated for right now is the SAG Awards, right? And I think that's immediately what stands out as it's a perfectly acted film in that regard.
It is. It's an actor's movie, I think, for that. And that doesn't take any of the spotlight away from Nina Arianda and as Vivian Vance and J.K. Simmons as Bill Frawley, which I think were also terrific, terrific. But I think their relationship, right, their little sort of sub relationship within this movie is all about casting for part and dealing with just sort of ageism and perspective, and the fact that Vivian reportedly detested working with Frawley because he was as old as her grandfather, and it just never felt like a real relationship. It was just for the comedy and never.
So she always detested working with him, is what you're saying, or she never?
Yeah, that's what I am. Yeah. Is that what I said? No, that's not what I said. I said
I thought
it
you
wrong,
said she never detested
right.
it, but I think she always did because it was such a ridiculous pairing.
Yes, it was a ridiculous pairing. It was a slapstick pairing, a vaudeville pairing, and yet
it's a good way to look at it.
When J.K. Simmons at the end of the movie comes in and is standing on the in the back lot, right in the back of that set, on the street set. The three women are sitting on a bench: Nicole Kidman and Alia Shawkat and Nina Arianda, and they are such a perfect picture for me of all of the struggles that these women have had to deal with, again, writ large. And he says, J.K. Simmons, there's something that dies the first time a woman tells you he's old.
No.
And that was just crushing. It was just a crushing line from this character, from that actor, from this sort of set of competing perspectives that I bring as an audience member who still sees myself as 22 years old, and yet my beard is getting whiter by the day.
Right.
Like all of that was wrapped up in what this relationship, the Simmons and Arianda relationship.
Well,
did
then
for
and
me on screen.
you flip the mirror on that, because I agree with you totally. But that's one of the beauties of this film, is that it accounts for everyone's perspective, right? Because you have the scene with Ethel and Lucy having the confrontation about the breakfast being sent to her, and she, Ethel is saying this sort of like, you can't handle anyone looking better than you, all these things, and then Lucy turns around and says, America wants to see someone like them. You look like everyone there. It's all these perspectives are represented, and all of them are accurate, right? All these issues are all these points are valid in discussing all of these issues. And I think that's something that's really, really great about this film, and that nothing feels superfluous. Everything is relevant to telling the story. And I think that is so wonderful about the script.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought that was a really special thing. And I thought that was well portrayed as well.
Another thing that I bought into that was that I shouldn't have in the first watch. I mean, I know who Linda Lavin is. I think I actually know who Ronnie Cox is as well. But I was so reading the newspaper and buying that metaphor that you talked about before, buying what I was being sold, that when I saw the flashback representations played by these actors, I just believed it was real flashback. I didn't, it wasn't until going later on that I realized, that's meant to be told for the story. I totally bought the whole thing. I was with the vehicle of telling the story. And I know who these people are. That
would have been incredibly artful. That would have been super artful if that's what they had intended. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's documentary style, like all this thing. And then I get back and of course, I mean, now, watching it the second time, I'm like, yes, this is all scripted. Of course. Yes. But I was hook, line, and sinker the first time I watched it. It was wonderful.
I'm so glad you were. I struggled a little bit when Ronnie Cox showed up, because Ronnie Cox is somebody I know probably the most.
Yeah. I know Linda Lavin more, but
all those faces.
I know those faces, but for me, I was faces, I kind of know those faces. Maybe they are these people from old Hollywood.
Maybe they then became actors.
It was silly and
lives.
Stupid for me, but that's where I was on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the thing that sort of shook me, that flashback architecture. I liked it. I thought Linda Lavin's was the best.
Yeah,
she was just fantastic. But I also loved Alia Shawkat. I think she's fantastic, and I have a recurring dream in which Alia Shawkat is like an MC to my dreams, and
that's great.
She's like, it's like not a weird dream. It's just like she literally shows up and she's like, and now we're going to turn to camera 2, and then there's a scene that's a dream. It's very strange, but she has been a part of my dreamscape for years.
She's in the control booth. I'm all about it.
Yeah, she's in the control booth. Yeah, she runs. Great. She runs my psyche. That's weird. So glad I just talked about that on the show.
Pete Wright, Inside Out.
Yeah. Another transformative perspective here, though, is Tony Hale. And Tony Hale, the whole Arrested Development connection with Alia Shawkat and now Tony Hale. You see an actor for the first time playing a part that is so wildly out of human context as the part Tony Hale played on Arrested Development. Are you an Arrested Development fan?
I am not
at all. Okay, he played a very strange and not altogether well family member, and you just get a sense that it's super affected performance. Very, very funny as Buster Bluth. Loses a hand, has weird attachment for a hand for a long time. I mean, he's just really a damaged a slapstick character, and then he shows up and he plays this, and I think that is another one of those transformative performances. This is one of those performances that gives you a sense of range on a very big scale.
Yeah,
he has done a lot of other great comedy bits, but here we have a chance to see him doing something new.
And he has a bit of an arc. I mean, even you have both the old version of him and then the young, but what he goes through as the executive producer through it, it's really, really special to watch it go through.
Yeah. And I can't forget. Veep. He plays Gary Walsh, or played Gary Walsh on Veep as well with Julie Louis-Dreyfus. So, but you're right. He has an arc. I think it was a well-written character. I love the writers, and I love that the writers become our anchor for so much of the culture war that's going on in both sort of timelines. They are the anchor to the flashbacks as the architects of history, so to speak. And we get to see them actually being the architects of history in their writing of the show. And the fact that they didn't believe that they could pull off what Desi Arnaz was asking them to pull off in terms of actually showing motherhood on TV. I thought that was really special.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you think about their roles in the hierarchy of what's going on in that show. I mean, and they actually, they state it in the script a couple times. This is a show that's put on by Desilu Productions, and the president of Desilu is who's speaking to you right now. All this thing, that writers' room section where they introduce the pregnancy to the writers and talk about the stomping grape scene. And then we project into what the stomping grape scene can be. That is by far my favorite part of this entire movie, because it jumps forward and back and into fiction and into the show. And it is on the cusp of progress and all these things. It is so wonderfully executed, both in dialogue and in story and in visual representation too. It is fantastic. And that's something that's really special to see in this movie.
What do you think of their use and tour of set? I wonder if we are particularly attuned to movies like this because we just love hanging out in big studios. Is that possible? Is that possible? It's our bias.
Well, I mean, yeah. You mean you and me, or the public in general?
Oh yeah. I'm going to say you and me. Am I speaking out of turn for you? I love hanging out.
I agree
TV
with
studios.
that too. I mean, it feels like home a bit, right? To see that and to see that represented that way. And then the way that Sorkin writes it, because I think it's home for him too, is this really sort of that heartwarming thing of, come here and this is the place where we make the magic, right? And I, take some pride in being a part of that too.
I mean, it's the same reason I love Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, right? It's
Sure.
a behind the scenes tour of the experience of these people, and that I feel, again, a real kinship to. But take that and pair it with Jeff Cronenweth's a camera, and I think his use of camera in living in this space with people, in pairing it with the demands of an Aaron Sorkin script, I think was really special.
So that,
what do you love about the camera?
Oh, so much. And I didn't really see it until the second showing because I was so affected by the story the first time. So when I watched it the second time, I really witnessed the storytelling that the camera shows up and tells us. I especially like the intro where we are first introduced to Lucy and Desi, and we never see them on screen until they are shocked by Walter Winchell announcing the big announcement that we've been led to by the flashbacks, by the the fake documentary style thing. I think that's super smart, and the way the camera roams through that whole scene of their discussion and their confrontation and thing, it's just it's telling a story, and then it shocks us into introducing them. It's bookended really well with not the complete end of the film, but the end of the show part of the film, where we get Lucy and then pulling back and seeing the black and white and put on screen. There's so many tips and tricks that you come up from the camera here that are really special and really add to the specialness of this film as a whole.
What do you think about giving J. Edgar Hoover the savior role?
I thought of Tim Curry, J. Edgar Hoover from Clue.
Absolutely.
But it's always amazing to me, and this goes to the point of not really being rooted in that part of history, right? That being before our time. That he was such a name as he was the leader of the FBI, right? I don't want to get that wrong. That was his.
Yes, he was the FBI director.
Right. But he's so like throughout culture, everyone's talking about J. Edgar Hoover, and the fact that this is part of that too, whether it's true or part of the fictionalization, I think is just, it's very indicative of all the period pieces that I watch regarding that period of time. He
was. And I think I'm with you. Like, to me, I think, J. Edgar, I hear J. Edgar and I see Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Oh, like, did you see the movie J. Edgar?
No.
You need to see that movie.
All right.
I think. I mean, if you're into that movie, it barely crests the 6-star rating. It is the story of J. Edgar Hoover. And look, it's a big sprawling thing, but it does in fact star Leonardo and Armie Hammer and Naomi Watts, and
I like all of those people.
I mean, all good people,
right? Exactly.
So it'd be interesting to see what you thought. But for me, Leonardo's performance there has sort of again recanonized who J. Edgar Hoover is.
Sure,
and it is because I was not a part of this period of our history and only glancingly a student of it. And so I didn't have the baggage of hearing, and I know he is a controversial figure.
Hugely.
For good reason. Right?
Lots of reasons. Yeah, exactly.
But I think this is the important takeaway for me. I was not tied up enough in all of those important and controversial reasons that we don't like J. Edgar at this point.
Sure.
To let that get in the way of the fact that his voice, the character voice in this movie, repaired so much for this narrative. That was okay for me. I understand how that's a divisive thing for people who are more of a student of this time of history, of these people than I was. But for me, it fit with the story, and I needed that resolution. I needed at that point a little bit of a happy ending for Lucy.
Yeah, and that was very, very moving for me, that whole section. And it's meant to be, right? I guess that's the emotional climax of the film. And it really hit me hard. I think, to speak to your point about the accent or the delivery there, I think for that minor piece, that's not anything that would ever stick in my craw about the performance. I think if we had that sort of difficulty with either Desi or Lucy, I think that would be much more something that would get to me. One thing that I wanted to mention about Nicole Kidman in this role is that it reminded me of Cate Blanchett in The Aviator, and when she's playing, I think she's playing Katharine Hepburn. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing where both these women have such amazing careers. I would never want to say that, this is a defining role for Nicole Kidman, and not that for Cate Blanchett either. But in both these cases, when I have seen these women play these roles, it is such an immense amount of respect that I have for what they do and their craft, that they can transform in this way. And Cate Blanchett did it for me in that movie. And in this movie, I was completely sold. She did the Lucy, the exact Lucy, whether it's exact to who Lucy was, it was close enough for me to recanonize it, like you're talking about. This is now how I'm going to remember Lucille Ball, and that, I think, is a tribute to how well Nicole Kidman delivers this role in this movie.
That whole thing could be comical if you're not in it, like I was, right? You could see this crazy paranoid would-be dictator J. Edgar being the saving grace of Lucille Ball, and this Cuban who has just given us this incredible speech about, what he was running from, the communists on his home island, and getting here, which I thought was very powerful. When you wrap all that up in a bow, it's a mess. It is a mess. But I think, to me, that is that's the beauty of that sequence, that I can still feel good about what I have just seen, that's an end that feels somehow earned as a result of what Sorkin was able to do, both in word and in the frame.
Well, I agree.
And is still rewarding to me.
And the thing, all of the negatives surrounding anyone's perception or the sort of the legacy of J. Edgar Hoover, I think if you put it in the context of the time and you balance it with what's going on with the McCarthy hearings and who McCarthy was and that side of the world and who J. Edgar represented, I think it's the perfect person to sort of bring in the perfect name. We shouldn't even say person. The perfect name to bring in to this part of the film to be the savior here. And then what an energy roller coaster to go through that sort of immensely positive, tear-jerking moment of success to then go to the infidelity confrontation and the way that that's delivered. And that's so expert. Like the way the through line goes through the film of how, Lucy has to sort of balance all of this stress with the simple thing that she knows is deteriorating in her home life at the same time. It's just it's so intense. And that whole sequence, I was broken. I was broken in all different kinds of directions because of how I was taken emotionally through that section. Yeah.
What does that leave you with? And a little bit more specifically on how, because I know the history of their relationship is that, it didn't end up working out. Right.
Right.
But it is an interesting choice to leave us on their, that discovery of the infidelity, especially because it's essentially the punchline to a very sad joke that's been set up from frame one, right? From that wonderful scene in the beginning that you've already talked about. I feel like I feel like it was a good choice. It didn't bring me down too much, especially because that's a bit of the history that I already knew. A lot of ways to handle the dissolution of their relationship. This one felt okay.
Yeah, well, it felt appropriate. I mean, it definitely is consistent with the way that the story was told. And I think when I say an energy roller coaster, I think Sorkin meant it. I think Sorkin wanted you to feel all of the jumble that he brought to this story, whether or not that's the real way it happened. And I think all of that intensity sets us up so wonderfully. And I mean, both the positive intensity for the telephone call moment, to the infidelity confrontation, to the single time that Lucy forgot her lines, and gets lost in talking about Lucy, I'm home. It's just so wonderfully written from beginning to end when they talk about how Lucy was always looking to have a home, that was her ambition. I think that aspect, finding authenticity, finding an expectation that can actually be fulfilled, and really how difficult that is as human beings in navigating, fame, relationships, all these things. I think it's for me, it was kind of expertly told. I needed the weight of that moment, both the positive and the negative, to get the message of the futility of what they're trying to experience in that sort of final scene. I thought it was great.
There was recently a wonderful, sort of investigation, not an investigation, profile of Lucy by way of the kids. And
okay. Oh, and did you notice that they were both the executive producers of this, by the way?
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, I did.
Love
which is also telling about what kind of a story were they trying to tell, and did they want out there? And I think one of the things that I liked so much about it was that they were, I think they did a fine job of talking about how up and down their relationship was. They did remarry, but the way the kids talk about their relationship is that they deeply loved each other, Desi and Lucy, even through other relationships that they had. That particularly Lucy Jr., Lucy IE, she says her parents were the soulmates to one another, even though they married other people.
Interesting.
And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. They couldn't live without each other, and yet they also couldn't live with each other. And I think that roller coaster is depicted well in the film. And I liked that. I liked that they were just like, they couldn't get enough of each other, couldn't get their hands off of each other in the office. Like more of that. That was great.
Yep. And what I would. One of the things that our friend Tommy Handsome has told me about these kind of stories that I think is really good is that it feels tough but real, and that feels really earned in this movie as well.
We are on Letterboxd, True Story FM's family of film podcasts. They're all part of the Next Reels HQ page. Letterboxd is a great way to track the movies you see, to write your own reviews, be a part of the larger community of film lovers like yourself. It really is the best social network for movie lovers. You can sign up for your own account today, and if you choose to remove ads and support the Letterboxd team. You can upgrade to a pro or patron account. Use the discount code NEXTREEL at checkout. You'll save 20% off. It works for renewals as well. You already started by saying this is at the very top of your list of Sorkin's stuff. Do you consider all the stuff he's written, or just of the stuff that he's written and directed? I assume of the 3 that he's written and directed, this is your favorite.
Yes, it is. And I was considering all of them. I went back and looked. I can't say I like it more than Moneyball. Moneyball's kind of has a special place in my heart. And actually on rewatch, I've found all new kinds of things about Moneyball that I like. So this is kind of number 2 for me there. But ultimately, yeah, it's the best that he's written and directed for me. On initial watch of this, I thought it was a 4-star, and then going back and just really sort of examining it, it's even moved up to a 4.5 for me. It's a very strong movie, and it's worth it for all different kinds of reasons. Not just for the I Love Lucy story, not just for those details, but for Sorkin, for general filmmaking. I think it's going to get more awards too, or at least nominations. We'll see what wins. But when I think back to the pandemic here, I think this is one of the best movies that I've seen throughout the pandemic. It was definitely something that I didn't expect, and it really blew me away. And so I think that if people are looking for quality, this is a really strong movie. So it's 4.5 and a heart for me.
Well, you and I are kindred spirits. That's why we're here. It's 4.5 and a heart for me too. I really enjoyed it, and I watched the movie twice. I saw it by myself, and then I watched it again with my mom.
Nice.
And Mom was also that was her. She said, "I don't want to watch a Lucille Ball movie." I said, "No, I think you need to watch this movie." She loved it.
Good.
Completely. It's Mom. She's kind of a soft audience, but she loved it, and I took it as a great watch the second time too. So I think it's great. I hope that you listen to us talk about this movie, fair people, and you give it a chance if you haven't seen it, and maybe give it an optimistic chance. It could be really great if you want to see a great movie. You can also find lots of ways to twist it if you want that too.
It's on Amazon Prime. So, most of you folks have an Amazon Prime account, and you can just watch it for free and for fun, and it will be all of those things, fun and free.
It feels a little bit buried on Amazon Prime to me right now.
Does.
Amazon Prime is never the first place that I go to watch something, and that may be, unless Miss Maisel is on, is current. I'm not really watching Amazon Prime, so
Solid.
It is a little bit buried. Check out Being the Ricardos. That's it. What do you have going on? Are you doing anything? I know you guys are gearing up for a new season.
We are hard at work on the new sort of look and feel of Trailer Rewind. We've had a wonderful run with that show, and we have, talked about so many different wonderful, we talk about this being a diamond in the rough on streaming. It might be hard to find. That's what Trailer Rewind has always been about, is finding those kind of hidden movies that people might have missed when they were in wide release that are now streaming and ways to get out. We're talking about a new look and feel to get that out to people and kind of still share some of those special movies. We want to be the recommenders for people that are looking for special movies on streaming services.
I love it. And we are, Andy and I over on the main show, we're in the middle of our journalist series.
Fun.
And that's going to lead us right into our John Hurd series. The crossover is Between the Lines. Have you ever seen Between the Lines?
No, what's that all about?
It is I think you're going to really like it. And I think you should probably try to track it down, because it is the story of a ragtag alt newspaper in Boston in the 70s, and they are about to be bought by a big conglomerate, and it is the journey of navigating big business and small media.
1992? No, that's a different one.
No. It's going to be a different one.
That's a
with,
British police
John
drama.
Hurd and Jill Eikenberry.
1977.
77, directed by Joan Micklin Silver, and I think this is my first Joan Micklin Silver movie. I think you will love her work too. She's just fantastic. I want to see all of them now.
Cool. I'll check it out.
So that is it. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, for downloading, for listening to JJ and I with this wonderful island episode of JJ and I celebrating our love for Sorkin stories, and specifically Being the Ricardos. Don't forget to do the stuff you're supposed to do with your podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, and then, of course, listen. Perhaps most importantly, please share. Let any of those movie lovers in your life know about this show. The best way we have to get more people listening to this show is you. Thanks, everybody.